Admiral Kevvar floated in a command chair, his purple tentacles twitching with worry as he stared at the massive holographic display. Red warning lights blinked across dozens of star systems, but one sector made his blood run cold. The peaceful Zephyrian colonies were burning. "Sir, we just lost contact with New Haven Colony," his communications officer reported, her voice shaking. "That's the 7th settlement in 3 days." The Admiral's 4 eyes focused on the tactical readout. The Vorthak invasion force was moving like a plague across Zephyrian space. These weren't random attacks. They were systematic, calculated, and absolutely ruthless. The Vorthak didn't just conquer worlds. They harvested them. Every living being either became a slave or fertilizer for their war machine. "What about our peacekeeping fleets?" Kevvar asked, though he already knew the answer. "The 2nd Fleet is tied up with the Rigel conflict, sir. The 4th is dealing with those pirate raids near Vega. And the 6th?" His aide's voice trailed off. "The 6th was destroyed trying to stop the Vorthak advance 3 weeks ago." Kevvar felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. The Galactic Council had maintained peace for over 2,000 years through diplomacy and careful military positioning. But the Vorthak didn't care about treaties or negotiations. They were pure aggression, bred for conquest, and they had caught the galaxy completely off guard. A new signal chimed on his console. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Zephyrian Emergency Government." The hologram that appeared showed Elder Sylvan, the Zephyrian leader. Her normally pristine blue skin was covered in ash, and her large, gentle eyes were filled with terror. "Admiral Kevvar, please. We have perhaps 2 days before they reach our core worlds. Our children, they're taking our children for their breeding programs." The transmission cut to static, and Kevvar knew it meant the Zephyrian capital had fallen. "Sir," his aide whispered, "we have no available forces. The Council is considering a strategic withdrawal and containment protocol." "You mean abandoning them?" Kevvar said flatly. "Sir, the mathematics are clear. We cannot mount an effective defense with current resources." Kevvar stared at the spreading red zones on his display. 40 billion Zephyrians. An entire civilization of artists, philosophers, and healers who had never raised a weapon in anger. Now they were cattle waiting for slaughter. His communications officer suddenly straightened. "Admiral, I'm receiving multiple responses to our general distress call." "From whom?" "Various member species offering supply drops, medical aid, refugee assistance." She paused, her expression puzzled. "And one military deployment offer. Who would risk military engagement against the Vorthak?" "The humans, sir, from the planet Earth." Kevvar's tentacles curled in confusion. Earth was barely a footnote in the galactic database. A primitive world that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their entire planet had been at war with itself when first contact was made. The Council had classified them as developing aggressive tendencies, and kept contact minimal. Humans? What could they possibly offer? Their technology is centuries behind galactic standard. "Sir, they're requesting immediate tactical briefings and strategic deployment coordinates." The transmission is from someone called General Patrick Webb. The hologram activated, and Kevvar found himself looking at a creature unlike any he'd encountered in diplomatic circles. The human was larger than expected, with graying hair and pale skin marked by what appeared to be combat scars. But it was the eyes that made Kevvar's scales ripple with instinctive unease. They were the eyes of something that had learned to kill and had never forgotten how. "Admiral," the human said in heavily accented but clear galactic standard, "we understand you have a situation with hostile aliens attacking civilians. General Webb, we appreciate the offer, but this is a military crisis requiring. How many enemy combatants, what's their typical formation, and what kind of resistance have they encountered?" Webb interrupted, his voice carrying a strange intensity. Kevvar blinked all 4 eyes. Excuse me?" Behind Webb, other humans moved with purpose. Kevvar caught glimpses of weapons being loaded, vehicles being prepared, and soldiers receiving briefings. The level of organization was impressive, but what struck him most was their demeanor. They weren't preparing for a desperate last stand or a heroic sacrifice. They were preparing for work. "General, the Vorthak are a formidable enemy. They've destroyed every force sent against them. Our best military analysts estimate at least a 10-to-1 numerical advantage will be required for any chance of success. Webb's scarred face showed what humans called a smile, though it reminded Kethvar more of a predator baring its teeth. Admiral, we're not coming to fight a fair fight. We're coming to win. The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar staring at empty space. His aide approached cautiously. Sir, should we send them our tactical databases? Do it, the Admiral said quietly, and prepare a full briefing packet on Vorthack capabilities. Sir, are you certain? They're just one primitive species. What could they possibly do that our advanced civilizations could not? Kethvar looked back at the spreading red zones on his display, then at the small blue marking Earth's position. Something about that final human transmission bothered him, though he couldn't identify what. Perhaps, he said slowly, we're about to find out what happens when predators go to war. The first thing that caught Admiral Kethvar's attention wasn't the size of the human fleet, but the sound. As the 47 vessels dropped out of hyperspace, their engines produced a deep, threatening rumble that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. Most galactic ships hummed quietly, designed for efficiency and comfort. These human vessels growled like living beasts. Sir, his communications officer stammered, they're requesting immediate docking clearance for rapid deployment. Kethvar studied the approaching ships through the observation deck. They were unlike anything in the galactic database. Where Council vessels were sleek and elegant, these were brutal and functional. Angular hulls covered in armor plating, weapon batteries that looked disturbingly oversized, and what appeared to be impact scarring from previous battles. How many soldiers are they bringing? He asked. They're saying 12,000, sir. The Admiral's tentacles went rigid. 12,000? Most galactic conflicts involved a few hundred peacekeepers at most. The humans were treating this like a full-scale war. The docking bay filled with activity as the first human transport connected. General Webb emerged wearing what the humans called battle dress uniform, a practical outfit in muted colors that somehow made him look more dangerous than formal military attire would have. Behind him came a steady stream of soldiers, and Kethvar realized his first mistake had been thinking of them as individuals. They moved like a single organism. No wasted motion, no confusion about objectives. Each human seemed to know exactly where to go and what to do without constant communication. Dr. Miles Norton, the station xenobiologist, stood beside the Admiral watching the deployment with growing fascination. Look at their coordination, Norton whispered. Most species require constant verbal or digital communication for group activities. These humans are operating on some kind of instinctive level. Colonel Diana Stone approached their observation platform. She was smaller than Webb, but carried herself with the same predatory confidence. Admiral, we need full tactical briefings within the hour. My advanced teams are already analyzing the combat zone. Colonel, surely you need time to study our databases, review galactic military protocols. Sir, we've been studying your reports during transit. We've identified 17 critical tactical errors in the standard Council response doctrine. She activated a portable display that showed the Vorthack advance patterns. Your forces have been fighting them like this is a civilized conflict. It's not. Kethvar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. What do you mean? The Vorthack are apex predators from their homeworld, but they've only faced prey species. They use fear and intimidation because it works against creatures that evolved to run from threats. Stone's expression hardened. We didn't evolve to run. In the loading bays, human soldiers were unloading equipment that made no sense to galactic observers. Kethvar watched his teams assemble what appeared to be primitive kinetic weapons alongside energy systems that his scanners couldn't fully analyze. General, he said, approaching Webb, your weapons technology appears diverse. Webb looked up from a tactical display being operated by Lieutenant Ryan Hayes, a young human with steady hands and calculating eyes. We bring the right tool for the job, Admiral. Sometimes that's precision. Sometimes it's overwhelming force. Sometimes it's psychological warfare. Psychological warfare? The Vorthack control through fear. We're going to show them what fear actually looks like. Dr. Norton was studying a group of human medics with fascination. They were treating minor injuries that would have hospitalized most galactic species, barely pausing in their equipment checks. "Commander Hayes," he said to human officer, "your medical officer just treated a soldier with what our scanners indicate is a significant injury." Commander Beth Hayes glanced over at the soldier in question, who was lifting equipment that weighed more than most galactic beings. "Lieutenant Rodriguez? That's just a flesh wound. He'll be fine. But the trauma readings..." "Doc, we appreciate a concern, but Rodriguez has had worse injuries during training exercises. Pain tolerance comes with the territory when your planet spends millions of years trying to kill you." The casual way she said it made Norton's blood freeze. He pulled up Earth's environmental data again, reading details that hadn't seemed important during first contact protocols. Gravity nearly 3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most species. Temperature variations that qualified as extreme weather conditions. And somehow, life hadn't just survived there. It had thrived and produced these efficient killing machines. In the command center, General Webb was reviewing Vorthack tactical patterns with an expression that worried every alien observer. "They use standard intimidation formations," he said to Colonel Stone. "Terror raids, public executions, psychological pressure designed to break civilian morale." "Standard counter-terror operations, then?" Stone asked. "Modified. We're not just stopping them. We're sending a message to every hostile species in this galaxy." Webb's smile was cold. "They need to understand that attacking innocent civilians brings consequences." Admiral Kethvar overheard the conversation and felt something he'd never experienced in 2 centuries of military service. He was afraid of his own allies. The humans weren't just offering to help. They were offering to demonstrate why their species had survived on a world that would have extinguished any other civilization. As the human fleet prepared to depart for Zephyrian space, Kethvar received a final transmission from General Webb. "Admiral, we'll have your people home safe within a week. But after this, the galaxy's going to work a little differently." The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar staring at the departing human fleet. Somehow, he believed every word the general had said, and that terrified him more than the Vorthack ever had. Dr. Norton approached with a final observation that would haunt the Admiral's dreams. "Sir, I've been analyzing their biochemistry. Their stress hormones don't spike during combat preparation. They actually seem to enjoy this." The sulfur winds of Zephyr Prime carried the screams of the dying as Captain David Miller pressed his face against the rocky outcrop. Through his thermal scope, he watched the Vorthack terror camp spread out below like a cancer on the planet's surface. Massive alien figures moved between crude holding pens where blue-skinned Zephyrian civilians huddled in groups. "Jesus," whispered Corporal Jennifer Davis from her position beside him. "Look what they're doing to those families." Miller's jaw tightened as he observed the systematic cruelty. The Vorthack weren't just invading. They were farming fear. Public torture sessions to break the survivor's will. Children separated from parents to maximize psychological damage. It was efficient, calculated evil designed to turn an entire species into compliant livestock. Sierra Team report, Miller spoken to his comm unit. "We're in position," came the voice of Sergeant Amy Johnson. 23 hostiles visible. Standard intimidation formation. They've got about 200 civilians in the main compound. Bravo Team. Lieutenant Ryan Hayes responded from the Eastern Ridge. "Ready for your word, Captain. These aliens really don't understand camouflage, do they?" Miller studied the Vorthack positions through his scope. The aliens were massive, 8 feet tall with thick armor plating and weapons designed to terrify rather than kill efficiently. They strutted around their camp like predators showing off for prey. Their entire tactical doctrine was built around psychological dominance. "They've never fought anyone who fights back," Miller muttered. Down in the camp, Grosk, the Vorthack field commander, was enjoying his evening ritual. He selected a Zephyrian male from the holding pen and dragged him to the center of the compound where the other prisoners could watch. The public execution would remind them of their place in the new order. But something felt wrong. His thermal sensors kept picking up ghost readings at the camp's perimeter. Probably just the planet's volcanic activity interfering with equipment. Still, an odd unease gnawed at him. "Begin the demonstration," Gross commanded his lieutenant. That's when Private Tom Williams rose from what had appeared to be solid ground 20 feet away. The young human had been lying motionless in a shallow scrape for 6 hours, covered in mud and chemical compounds that masked his heat signature. His face was painted with earth and ash, making him nearly invisible against the rocky terrain. When he moved, it was with fluid precision that defied the planet's crushing gravity. Gross' lieutenant never saw the knife that ended his life. "Contact," Williams whispered into his comm. "One down. Move in position 2. The first Vortex sentry simply vanished. One moment he was standing guard. The next moment there was only empty space and a faint scuff mark in the dirt. Then the second guard disappeared. Then the third. Grosk felt something his species had no word for, the creeping realization that he was no longer the hunter. His thermal readings showed impossible signatures. These new creatures moved through his perimeter like ghosts, appearing and disappearing without pattern or warning. "Perimeter breach," he roared, but his soldiers were already panicking. They were used to terrifying herbivores, not tracking invisible predators through hostile terrain. "All teams, execute." Captain Miller's voice cut through the comm channels. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for decades. The humans didn't charge the fortified position like civilized species would. They didn't announce their intentions or demand surrender. They simply erased the Vortex defense line with surgical precision. Sergeant Johnson emerged from a crevice that her thermal scan said was too narrow for any life form. She moved with the patient efficiency of something that had evolved to chase prey across continents. The Vortex soldier she encountered turned to fire his intimidation weapon, a massive energy projector designed to cause maximum fear before death. Johnson rolled under blast, came up inside his guard, and put 3 kinetic rounds center mass before he could recalibrate. The entire engagement lasted 4 seconds. "Man, these guys are slow," she reported over comms. "It's like fighting in slow motion." Lieutenant Hayes was having similar success on the eastern flank. The Vortex had positioned themselves to dominate the high ground, but they hadn't considered that humans were persistence hunters. While they focused on immediate threats, Hayes had spent 2 hours circling around to attack from an angle they'd never conceived of defending. His first target was a Vortex communications specialist who'd been broadcasting propaganda to terrorize the prisoners. Hayes appeared behind him like a nightmare, moving silently despite the rocky terrain and hostile atmosphere. The alien's death was quick and efficient. "Communications down," Hayes reported. "They can't call for reinforcements." In the main compound, Grosk was experiencing true fear for the first time in his adult life. His forces were being systematically eliminated by enemies he couldn't see, track, or understand. These creatures moved through terrain that should have been impossible to navigate. They operated in atmospheric conditions that would kill most species, and they showed no fear whatsoever. Return fire, he screamed, but his soldiers were shooting at shadows. Corporal Davis had positioned herself in an overwatch position that gave her clear sight lines across the entire camp. Through her scope, she watched Vortex soldiers firing wildly at empty rocks, while human operators moved between them like smoke. "These guys have never fought anything that hunted back," she observed quietly. Captain Miller was moving toward the prisoner compound when a massive Vortex warrior spotted him. The alien raised his weapon with a roar designed to freeze prey with terror. Miller looked up at the 8-foot monster, calculated angles and distances, and threw his combat knife with casual accuracy. The blade took the Vortex in the throat, dropping him instantly. "Prisoner compound secured," Miller reported, helping a terrified Zephyrian child to her feet. "Civilians are safe." The entire engagement lasted 18 minutes. When the smoke cleared, the Vortex force that had terrorized an entire planet was gone. Not defeated, eliminated. The survivors would carry word back to their fleet that something new had entered the war, something that hunted hunters. 3 days into the campaign, Dr. Miles Norton couldn't sleep. He sat in his laboratory aboard the Council observation ship, staring at data readings that shouldn't have been possible. The numbers were clear, but they made no sense according to everything galactic science understood about biology. "Computer, run the analysis again," he whispered. The holographic display showed the same impossible results. Human soldiers operating in 3.2 times standard gravity without mechanical assistance. Combat effectiveness maintained after 72 hours without rest. Continued fighting capability despite injuries that would have killed most galactic species outright. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission from the surface. Commander Beth Hayes appeared on screen, her face streaked with mud and what looked like purple alien blood. Behind her, the ruins of what had been a Vorthack stronghold smoldered in the toxic atmosphere. Dr. Norton, medical reporting. We've got 18 wounded, all walking and combat ready. No fatalities. Norton's four hands trembled as he checked his readings. Commander, my scanners show Private Rodriguez has sustained trauma equivalent to 3 separate major injuries. Hayes glanced over at the soldier in question, who was currently helping load captured Vorthack weapons onto a transport vehicle. Rodriguez caught her look and waved casually. Yeah, Doc. He took some shrapnel yesterday. Nothing serious. Nothing serious? Norton's voice cracked. The metal fragments missed his primary circulatory pump by 3 millimeters. Most species would be in surgical recovery for weeks. Rodriguez played football in college. Hayes said with a shrug. Trust me, he's had worse. The transmission ended, leaving Norton staring at his data in growing horror. He pulled up Earth's planetary classification files, documents that had been largely ignored during humanity's integration into galactic society. What he found made his blood freeze. Earth wasn't just a high-gravity world. It was a death world. The atmospheric composition alone would poison most galactic species within hours. The radiation levels from their star should have prevented complex life from evolving. The seasonal temperature variations were more extreme than most planets experienced during ice ages. How did anything survive there? He whispered. His computer chimed with another impossible report from the surface. Major Robert Clark's unit had been tracking Vorthack forces for 4 days straight through terrain that registered as uninhabitable on galactic charts. The humans were not only surviving, they were gaining ground. Norton opened a channel to the surface. Major Clark, this is Dr. Norton. I need to understand something about your operational parameters. Clark's voice came back steady and professional despite the fact that he was apparently jogging while speaking. Go ahead, document. You've been in continuous pursuit for 96 hours through toxic atmosphere, extreme temperature variations, and crushing gravity. How is this possible? Sir, this is actually pretty comfortable compared to basic training. The gravity is a bit heavy, but nothing we can't handle. Norton checked his readings again. The surface gravity was enough to crush most galactic beings. What was your basic training like? Oh, standard stuff. 20-mile runs in full gear, survival exercises in desert and Arctic conditions, sleep deprivation training. The usual. The casual way Clark described what sounded like systematic torture made Norton realize something terrifying. These weren't soldiers who had been trained to be tough. They were beings whose very existence required constant adaptation to lethal conditions. On the surface, the Vorthack were learning the same lesson. Grosk had retreated to a defensive position in the planet's northern mountain range. Certain humans couldn't follow through the razor-sharp volcanic glass and poisonous gas vents. He was wrong. Captain Miller's team emerged from terrain that should have been impossible to traverse. They moved with the patient persistence of creatures that had spent millions of years chasing prey across endless landscapes. Every time the Vorthack thought they found safety, humans appeared like nightmares from their deepest evolutionary fears. They never stop, Grosk's surviving lieutenant whimpered. We run, they follow. We hide, they find us. They don't even seem tired. Grosk studied the tactical displays with growing dread. His forces had been designed to terrorize agricultural species that had evolved in peaceful environments. These humans came from a world that had been actively trying to kill them since their species began. Every adaptation that seemed strange to galactic observers suddenly made perfect sense. Their endurance wasn't superhuman. It was survival necessity on a world where giving up meant death. Their accuracy with projectile weapons came from millions of years of hunting for food. Their pack coordination was a result of evolving alongside megafauna that could kill individuals but not groups. Dr. Norton opened a channel to Admiral Kethvar. "Sir, I need to share something with you about our human allies." "What is it, Doctor?" "Earth isn't classified correctly in our databases. We labeled it as marginally habitable, but it's actually what we call a death world. Everything that lives there has been shaped by constant lethal pressure." Kethvar felt his confidence wavering. "What does that mean for our operation?" "Sir, we didn't recruit soldiers. We recruited apex predators who learned to use tools. The Vorthak specialize in terrorizing peaceful species, but humans—" Norton paused, struggling to find words. "Humans specialize in surviving on a planet covered in things that wanted to eat them." Down on Zephyr Prime, Private Rodriguez was sharing rations with a group of rescued Zephyrian children who had been too terrified to speak for days. Despite his injuries, he was patient and gentle, making funny faces until they smiled. The contradiction puzzled the Zephyrian elder Valera. "You fight like demons," she told him quietly. "But with our young ones, you are so careful." Rodriguez considered this. "Ma'am, where we come from, protecting kids is what separates people from monsters. These Vorthak cross that line." His words carried a quiet finality that made Valera understand something profound about these strange saviors. They weren't just warriors. They were guardians shaped by a world that had taught them the difference between necessary violence and pointless cruelty. The revelation was spreading through both fleets. Humanity hadn't just joined the galactic community. They'd introduced it to the concept of true apex predators. The surrender came not through formal diplomatic channels, but through a desperate transmission from the fleeing Vorthak fleet commander. Grosk's massive form filled a holographic display. His armor cracked and his voice shaking with something the galaxy had never heard from a Vorthak before: pure terror. "Council forces, this is Field Commander Grosk. We are withdrawing from all Zephyrian territories." Immediately, Admiral Kethvar blinked his 4 eyes in disbelief. "Commander, are you surrendering?" "We are retreating. Tell your human allies. Tell them we understand the message. We will not return to this sector. Ever." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Council command staff staring at each other in stunned silence. In 3,000 years of galactic history, the Vorthak had never retreated from anything. They conquered or died trying. But faced with humanity's methodical efficiency, they had simply left. Dr. Miles Norton pulled up the final combat statistics with trembling hands. 73% Vorthak casualties. Human losses. He paused, checking the numbers twice. 12 injured, 0 killed. "That's impossible," whispered Commander Hayes. "It gets worse," Norton continued. "The humans accomplish in 1 week what our projections said would require 6 months and a fleet 10 times the size." On Zephyr Prime, the cleanup operations were revealing the true scope of what had happened. Captain Miller stood in what had been the main Vorthak command center, now reduced to twisted metal and organic debris. Around him, human soldiers were methodically processing the site with the same efficient precision they'd shown in combat. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Ryan Hayes, "we recovered approximately 3,000 Zephyrian civilians from the detention facilities. Medical teams are treating them now." Miller nodded, watching as Corporal Davis helped a group of Zephyrian children who'd been hiding in underground tunnels for weeks. The kids were drawn to humans despite their initial fear, something that puzzled the adult Zephyrians. Elder Valera approached Miller cautiously. She had been studying the humans throughout the Liberation campaign, trying to understand what they truly were. "Captain, may I ask you something?" "Of course, ma'am." "Your soldiers, they show such care for our people, especially the young ones. But in battle," she gestured toward the destroyed Vorthak positions, "how do you maintain such balance?" Miller removed his helmet, revealing a face that was younger than his tactical efficiency suggested. "Elder, where we come from, you learn early that there are sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. The wolves prey on the sheep. The sheepdog protect them. It's not complicated." "And which are you?" "We're the thing that hunts the wolves." The simplicity of his answer carried a weight that made Valera understand why the Vorthak had fled. The humans weren't just another military force. They were something fundamentally different, predators with a moral code. Across the galaxy, The implications were spreading like ripples through still water. In the Rigel system, where Council forces have been locked in a stalemate with separatist militants for months, the rebels suddenly opened surrender negotiations. Word had reached them that the humans were available for peacekeeping operations. On the war-torn moon of Kepler-7, warlords who had been fighting over territory for decades found themselves agreeing to peace talks when human mediators were mentioned as a possibility. The galaxy was learning a new equation. Continued aggression might mean meeting these strange mammals from the death world called Earth. General Patrick Webb stood in Admiral Kethvar's ready room, reviewing deployment schedules with the same calm professionalism he'd shown throughout the campaign. Admiral, we'll maintain a small garrison force in the Zephyrian system for the next 6 months, just to make sure the message was received clearly. General, the Council is grateful for your assistance, but we must discuss long-term integration protocols. Webb looked up from his tactical pad, and Kethvar was struck again by those predatory eyes. Admiral, with respect, the galaxy just learned what happens when you threaten innocent civilians under human protection. I'd suggest making that lesson permanent. What are you proposing? Earth Command is establishing the 3rd Expeditionary Force specifically for galactic peacekeeping operations. We'll base them at strategic points throughout Council space, available for rapid deployment when diplomacy fails. The casual way Webb discussed projecting human military power across the galaxy made Kethvar's scales ripple nervously. General, the other member species may find permanent human military presence concerning. They should be concerned about the alternative, Webb replied quietly. Admiral, you sent us a distress call because your people were being slaughtered. We came because that's what we do. But now every aggressive species in the galaxy knows that attacking innocent civilians brings consequences they can't handle. In his laboratory, Dr. Norton was compiling his final report on human capabilities. The data was terrifying in its implications. Humans weren't just effective fighters. They were apex predators who had learned to cooperate on a scale that defied galactic understanding of evolutionary psychology. Computer theoretical analysis. What would happen if humanity decided to conquer rather than protect? The response made his blood freeze. Based on observed capabilities, estimated timeline for human galactic dominance, 18 months. But as Norton watched the feeds from Zephyr Prime, he saw something that gave him hope. Human soldiers were playing games with Zephyrian children, teaching them skills, helping rebuild schools. These weren't conquerors. They were guardians who had found their purpose in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The final transmission came from Captain Miller as the human forces prepared to establish their permanent base. Council Command, this is Zephyr Prime Garrison. Message to all species, all systems. We're not here to rule. We're not here to conquer. We're here to make sure the sheep can sleep safely. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the quiet authority of something that had never learned to back down. But if you're thinking about hunting sheep, remember that we're watching. And we're very, very good at hunting hunters. The galaxy would never be the same. Peace was no longer maintained through careful diplomacy and balanced forces. It was maintained by the simple knowledge that somewhere out there, apex predators from a death world were keeping watch. And they took their job very seriously.